Hey there, 8th graders, and welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping right into one of the most famous, literally game-changing documents in all of human history, the Emancipation Proclamation. We're going to unpack exactly how your curriculum presents this incredible piece of history, digging into the big what, why, and how.
To get us there, here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, the war's new purpose. Then, waiting for the right time, the global impact, the limits of freedom, and finally, morality, education, and justice.
Section 1. The Shift. Redefining the Civil War.
Okay, let's dive into this. When the Civil War kicked off in 1861, it was entirely about keeping the country glued together, right? Just a fight over territory. But as you'll see here, by 1863, the mission completely evolved. It went from just save the Union to save the Union and end slavery. The Emancipation Proclamation literally turned a fight over a map into a massive battle for human freedom. Suddenly, Union soldiers weren't just fighting to bring rebellious states back. They were fighting to end slavery where it still existed in the South. It was a real game changer.
Now, your curriculum actually anchors this massive moral pivot in Scripture. Looking at Luke 4:18, it says, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners." This really highlights how the source material views freedom and justice. The Emancipation Proclamation took a completely broken, bleeding nation and pointed it right back to that vital moral principle, the idea that slavery was fundamentally wrong.
Section 2. The Strategy. Waiting for the right time.
So put yourselves in President Lincoln's shoes for a second. You know you need to make this bold move, but you can't just do it on a random Tuesday. You have to wait for the perfect strategic moment. Timing and leadership is absolutely everything. Looking at this timeline, by mid-1862, things were looking pretty rough for the Union Army. If Lincoln had dropped the proclamation then, well, it would have looked like total desperation, right? Like a last-ditch effort from a losing side. He needed a big win first, and he finally got one at the Battle of Antietam. It was only after that crucial victory that he announced the proclamation would actually take effect on January 1, 1863.
So, the crucial point to take away from this is how that victory at Antietam gave Lincoln the political muscle he desperately needed. He completely avoided looking desperate, built up massive political strength, and, maybe most importantly, issued a serious ultimatum to the rebel states. He basically said, hey, return to the Union by January 1st, or the enslaved people in your territory will be declared forever free. They refused, and boom, the order took effect.
Section 3. The Global Impact. Keeping allies away from the Confederacy.
You see, this wasn't just a message to Americans. It was a brilliant move in a huge international chess game. Britain and France were watching the war super closely, and they were actually thinking about helping out the Confederacy. But there's a huge catch. Both of those nations had already outlawed slavery. By making the war explicitly about ending slavery, Lincoln pulled off a total masterstroke. He made it morally impossible for Britain and France to jump in, because if they supported the South now, the whole world would know they were fighting to protect slavery. So they had to stay out.
Section 4. The Limits of Freedom. The messy reality of political compromise.
As incredible as this document was, we do have to look at the messy truth of history here. The proclamation didn't just wave a magic wand and free everyone instantly. Now, what's really interesting about how this is laid out is the harsh reality of political compromise. It declared that enslaved people in the rebellious states were free, but that freedom absolutely did not apply to the border states that stayed loyal to the Union, like Kentucky, Missouri. It also didn't apply to Confederate areas the Union Army had already taken over. Lincoln did this to keep those border states from joining the rebellion, but the tough reality was that for many, their freedom completely relied on Union troops physically marching into the South.
But even with those limits, make no mistake, this was earth-shattering. It literally inspired hundreds of thousands of African Americans to take freedom into their own hands. They escaped, they fled to Union lines, and they joined the Union Army in absolutely massive numbers. We're talking about picking up weapons to actively fight for their own liberation and their family's freedom. It was just an unstoppable wave of courage.
I want to pause right here and ask you guys to really think about this. How can people work for justice, even when progress happens just one tiny step at a time? The proclamation wasn't perfect, right? It was limited, but it absolutely moved the needle. It pushed the nation closer to justice. True justice usually requires that patient, step-by-step progress, and leaders willing to push for what's right, even when the change is messy or incomplete.
Section 5. Morality, Education, and Justice. The HeroesMart Academy Philosophy.
Let's move on and see how this builds into the curriculum's core philosophy for godly learners. We've covered the history, but how does the source material connect this to your education today? The text points to Romans 8:6-7, which promises peace of mind to those who keep their minds spiritual, suggesting that aligning your thoughts and actions with justice brings true life. Much like how the Emancipation Proclamation pointed a deeply broken nation toward moral truth, this philosophy really encourages students to point their own minds toward what is right.
And that brings us to the core lesson your curriculum is trying to drive home here. Education without morality will hurt. The text makes the argument that being super smart, getting straight A's, and memorizing all the facts in the world means absolutely nothing if you use that knowledge to make choices that hurt yourself and the people around you. Under this framework, being highly educated but morally bankrupt just means you're using your intelligence to do a lot more damage.
So the lesson leaves us with this really provocative final thought. What is the point of being highly educated if we don't use our knowledge to choose what is right? Just like Lincoln had to use his position to steer a nation toward justice, this curriculum is calling on you to use your education to make righteous, just, and moral choices. That's a lot to think about, isn't it? Thanks so much for joining me to unpack this explainer today, and I'll see you next time.